Hello and welcome to Rick's RC Flying Channel. This is episode 10 of the Sweet and Low build. In this episode, we're going to continue construction of the right wing panel. So let's get started.
So the next step now is to do the sheeting of the top and bottom of the wing. And the sheeting will cover from the leading edge to the top of the spar. And I won't cover the entire top of the spar because we're going to have to put some rib cap strips, so they'll be glued to the spar as well. So we have to leave a bit of a space. Now I have to put two pieces of sheeting material together in order to make the distance from the leading edge to the spar. And it is oversized on the leading edge side, and we will trim the sheeting material from the leading edge once everything has been glued. Where the accuracy in lining the sheeting material will take place on the top of the spar. So I'm just sanding the sheeting material now that the two pieces have been glued together. We want it nice and smooth so we make good contact with the ribs. Now we'll also be applying sheeting material which will make up the top of the trailing edge, and the trailing edge that's been applied on the bottom of the wing with the strip of wood which will eventually have the hinges installed was slightly oversized to allow sanding it flush with the top of the ribs here now, which is what I'm doing. This will ensure that the sheeting material will have a smooth contact both with the aft trailing edge and the top of the ribs. And here I'm just doing a final sanding just to make sure that everything is perfectly smooth. So we're just removing some of the dust. We don't want any dust on top of the ribs or anywhere that we'll actually be applying the glue. And just checking to make sure everything is perfectly smooth. And also by removing the dust, you can see better all the joints. So now the leading edge is going to have to be shaped so it matches the contour of the forward part of the ribs. And right now I'm just using a plane to do a bulk removal of the wood. As I get closer and closer to the ribs, I'll switch over to a sanding block. And after doing some sanding with 80 grit paper, as I get closer to the ribs, I'll apply some masking tape over the ribs just to protect them. And then I'll be doing a final sanding so that the leading edge matches the contour of the forward part of the ribs. It's very important during the sanding process that you don't make contact with the top of the ribs, because ultimately this will affect the gluing process when we put the sheeting on, and the rib may not make contact with the sheeting. That's why I put the masking tape on top of the ribs. This way it guides me. I can tell when I'm getting too close to the ribs because it starts scuffing the masking tape. So now I'm just taking a pair of dividers and I'm just checking the dimension of the leading edge, and just in the event there is an inconsistency, maybe a high spot or low spot that would have to be reshaped with some sanding. So I found that the center area was a little bit on the higher side, so I'm just going to sand that out right now. So I'm just checking again the leading edge sizing with a pair of dividers, and it all looks good right now, so we'll move on to the trailing edge. So I'm just marking with a pencil where the trailing edge is, and just to guide me when I'm applying the glue, because I don't want to put the glue somewhere I don't need it. And especially have to be careful because we will be applying some rib cap strips. And so we don't want any glue in that area because it'll interfere with applying the cap strips. So now I'm simply applying the glue. I happen to be using Carpenter's glue, and I mean you would have other choices in glue, but I like using alphatic glues for sheeting. Just gives me that afforded time to get things lined up. And it's very strong and it's always worked out very well for me. So make sure that the glue completely covers the wood surfaces, and that's what I'm doing here with the aft part of the trailing edge strip here. Just making sure it has a complete film of glue. Any areas that look a bit thin or dry, I just reapply some glue and spread it out. As for the ribs, I don't spread it out there. I leave a bead of glue on top of the ribs itself. So make sure that you use enough pins that you don't have any areas that would allow the sheeting not to make contact with the ribs. So you want to go around and apply pressure, and if you feel any spots that may be like floating up, make sure you pin those down. So now we're going to do the sheeting on the forward portion of the wing, and I'm just checking here the leading edge just to make sure that it's perfectly level and straight. And now we're simply going to apply the glue. Again, on the leading edge, it's going to be a solid film of glue. I'm going to spread it out the same way. And again, on the ribs themselves, I leave a bead of glue. Now on top of the spar, I spread the glue out as well with my finger. And the sheeting is only going to cover half of the top surface of that spar. As mentioned before, cap stripping will occupy the other half. And you can see here that the sheeting is going to overhang the front leading edge. And later on, when it's all dry and we do some shaping, we'll be removing the excess sheeting in front of the leading edge. Now, when you start pinning the sheeting, you start pinning on top of the spar and you secure the sheeting there, and I'm wiping excess glue away from the top of the spar. And then the next pinning sequence will be over the leading edge. And you kind of almost push-pull towards the leading edge to ensure that you're making contact with the ribs. Now, there are many different ways of actually applying the sheeting. I'm applying my sheeting dry. There are cases where modelers will wet their sheeting with a water, ammonia-based solution. It helps the sheeting bend over curves. I myself prefer to use it dry because when it's wet and the sheeting then dries, there can potentially be a risk for warping. You can also pre-shape the sheeting also by wetting it and having it over a mold and then creating the curve ahead of time, which makes it easier to sheet, and you probably wouldn't need as many pins as well. Now the sheeting adds tremendous strength to the wing, and now I'm applying cap strips over the ribs, and this also structurally makes the ribs much stronger. Also, when we apply the covering, we get a much smoother looking finish due to the cap strips. Now I cut the cap strips just slightly oversized, and then I just do a bit of sanding so I get a perfect snug fit. As a matter of fact, as you pop the cap strip on top of the rib, because of the tight fit, it actually holds the curvature of the rib. And I use medium CA applied to the rib and then apply the cap strip. Also take a pencil and mark the rib position on the leading edge sheeting and on the trailing edge sheeting. That way when you apply the cap strip, it'll be perfectly lined up over the rib. If you look carefully, you'll see the small pencil tick mark that I use as a guide for applying the cap strip. Now that we've finished sheeting the top of the wing, we've turned the wing over, and in essence now this is the bottom of the wing. Here I'm installing the spar, and as far as orientating the wing on top of the plans, it's not necessary because it's already been basically constructed. Although we will have to pin it down to ensure it's absolutely perfectly flat and secure. Now that the wing has been secured to the table, we're going to glue this spar in place with thin CA glue. Now before we begin with the sheeting, we're going to be installing web bracing. Now the first pieces of web bracing we're going to install are the plywood pieces that we actually used earlier on when we were setting the center rib dihedral. Now they're going to be glued in place. Now these web plywood braces are actually creating a space in between the top and bottom spars. And in essence, it becomes like a box. And what will happen here is the wing joining brace will be slid in between the two spars, and the plywood web bracing is what creates this box. So we're going to use 30-minute epoxy and prepare the area that the web plywood braces will be installed. Also, now's the time to cut open the area that the yellow arrow is showing to allow the wing joiner brace to slide through there. We'll be cutting another opening, just as was indicated with the yellow arrow, on the center rib. And we'll be doing that a little bit later on. Then the wing joiner brace will slide through the first two ribs and be pushed all the way till it contacts the third rib. Now that the plywood web braces have been installed, make sure you wipe off any excess epoxy. We don't want anything to interfere with the sheeting later on. So here I'm just applying a little more epoxy in the joint area. We want the maximum amount of strength we could possibly get, because this is the area, again, as I mentioned, where the wing joiner spar brace will be inserted in that box that we created. Now here we have the rest of the web bracing installed with the remaining ribs, and it's 1/8 inch balsa wood. Also note the grain pattern that the web bracing was installed. This is to ensure maximum structural strength. So now I'm just doing a light final sanding just to ensure that everything is flush. For example, where the spars and ribs meet, where the ribs and leading edge transition, we want to make sure there are no ridges or bumps, anything that could possibly interfere with a smooth sheeting installation. So now we're going to proceed with the sheeting, and it'll be applied the same way as we did the top side. Now I'm just putting some small marks on top of the spar there, which is actually just in the middle or the halfway point of the spar itself. That way it makes it easy to line up the sheeting material. Now since we'll be closing up the front part of this wing, we want to make sure there's no debris or anywhere in any of these chambers, because once we sheet it, it'll be completely closed off. So the gluing process is the same as you've seen before when we did the top side of the wing. It's important to remove any excess glue as to not interfere with the rest of the sheeting. Now this sheeting is only sitting on half of the width of that rib, so the other sheeting that is applied in the center section has a support of that rib. And this was an old glue brush which I removed the bristles and flattened it, and I used that to help scrape away the glue. And again, just as we did on the top side, we're applying the rib cap strips. Now these cap strips are the same thickness as the sheeting material, so therefore everything will have a smooth, flush surface. Now don't apply any cap strips where the center section sheeting will be placed as you see here. So now we're going to let the sheeting all dry before removing the pins, just checking the accuracy of the leading edge and trailing edge. Everything looks nice and straight, so I'm quite pleased with it.
So in this episode, we've almost completed the right wing panel. The servo installation and the aileron installation will come when the two wing halves are put together. Episode 11 will be constructing the left wing panel. So be sure to watch for the next episode. And if you like the video, please select like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, I always welcome them. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.